Hi, everyone. This meeting is being recorded, so you may be watching on YouTube. We appreciate it. If you're not already subscribed to the Mentor Maryland DC YouTube channel, that is where you can find all of our virtual trainings that we are able to record. And today, you have joined us in light of Pride Month in partnership with Baltimore Pride and the Pride Center of Maryland for supporting and mentoring LGBTQ plus youth in 2025. I know I see many partners on the call, which I appreciate you all being here and engaging. But if you were not aware, because you come through us through the Pride Center or through Baltimore Pride, Metro Maryland DC is a nonpartisan organization that we serve the region. We are part of a national affiliate. We're serving Maryland and DC, obviously, and we are your local experts in Maryland doing whatever we can to ensure that you, mentoring programs, mentors, have everything you need to do the best possible work. And we do that through things like advocacy, like training like these, by talking with you about research and best practices. So if you're not already engaged with us, welcome. We're excited that this is your first time with us, and hopefully we'll continue to be in touch. So in addition, you will get a link to the recording and these slides, which will have lots of links for you to engage with. So everything we're talking about here, you'll be able to access, which is some of our resources. Again, the connection with the National Mentoring Partnership, who we're affiliate under. If you're at the National Mentoring Summit in January, give a shout. But they are our leaders, our researchers, our backing that allow us to do this work. I know many of you have been involved in our no-cost technical assistance, and that link will tell you more. If you're not already listed in the Mentoring Connector, which is the only national database for mentoring programs to advertise mentoring opportunities, I hope you can get in there, and if you need help, you can reach out to one of us. I know many of you come from our roundtables and our regional meetings and things like that. We appreciate you being here, but you can keep up with us on our events page and see when there may be more times to connect and also to connect in person. And we've been talking about the new element of effective practice a lot this year, EEPM 5. So that is a big part of our work. We are looking to do trainings in EEPM 5 this year and a lot in the next year. So we all get kind of caught up. So you can check out the resource now at this link, of course. We have our National Quality Mentoring System, which essentially is kind of like an audit, a continuous improvement process for programs to see kind of where they are as it relates to best practices and how they can keep up. And if you're not already on our newsletter, which is where you can get notices about funding opportunities and these resources and more, and resources from you all, from our partners, I hope you will subscribe to our newsletter to get that information. I'm going to move us right into virtual logistics. So it seems like people are down with the chat. Love that. Y'all get it. If you can mute yourself there, stop your video, raise your hand, send an emoji. If you want to practice sending an emoji now, I'd love to see. And again, if you can't find the chat, the right-hand corner, press the chat. You'll be able to send a message to everyone. There's also like GIFs and emojis and stuff. So, get in there and keep it lively. And then lastly, we are using something called Slido today to manage our Q&A. So I'm going to ask you actually now to open a tab on your phone to go to slido.com. When you get there, you'll see at the top, joining as a participant, that's you. You'll enter the code, which that code is Youth Pride. After you enter the Youth Pride code, it'll take you here for one more passcode, and that passcode is Mentor. And then you will see the Q&A, which you can enter a question in at any time, and I'll be moderating the Q&A for us today, and hopefully make time for us to engage there. And we'll also be doing an activity that is in Slido as well. So we'll resend that information in a few slides just for us to connect, but it is an opportunity for us to engage in another way in this training. And then many of you are aware of the Metro Maryland DC Credly program. We do have a Credly badge for those attending today. For those who attend the whole session, it will be acknowledging your experience here and what we learned and what we talked about. So these are typically issued within a week of the training. This is what our beautiful badge looks like, so you can have on your Credly profile. And Andre, who is on the call, designed it. So thank you, Andre, for your incredible work. So who am I and why should you care what I have to say, right? So we like to do this in the beginning of our training so we can help folks understand where we are coming from, because there's no such thing as an unbiased trainer or facilitator. We are informed and given a lens from our work experiences, from our social identities, from our privileges, from our sites of oppression. So I like to affirm these and acknowledge these from the beginning. So while of course I aim to be unbiased and the like, that's impossible. So a little information about me and what might be informing how or why I say certain things and how I'm facilitating with you today. So I am privileged to be one of the National Master Trainers of Mentoring Practices. So again, I hope you trust me with the mentoring information I'll be sharing with you today. I'm a certified professional through the Society of Human Resources. So I also have a human resources background, which are workplace rights and labor relations and things like that. They also acknowledge me as people manager qualified, so a lot of experience in managing youth development practitioners and managing mentors. So that's been a huge part of my work experience as well. I'm a return Peace Corps volunteer. I'm an AmeriCorps alum, so I've had the privilege to be in other places, to learn about communities different than mine. If there are any RPCVs or AmeriCorps alum here, shout out in the chat. Baltimore is one of the top AmeriCorps cities, and I know AmeriCorps, they're going through something as well right now, but love to acknowledge those who have served. My entire career has been in youth development and nonprofits, which is going on 18 plus years now. And I feel very privileged to say that as well. It definitely lends towards some of my expertise. I've been in Baltimore the past 12 years, working specifically in youth mentoring. And another privilege, I'm not from Baltimore, so I'm happy to be here and serve Baltimore's unique youth and populations. As far as my identities, and you may hear my dog barking in the background, and there'll be nothing to be do about that. But as far as my identities and that lens that I bring, I would consider myself a gender. I don't really think about labels regarding my gender because I don't really care about gender. That's my experience. But my pronouns are they, them. So I appreciate being referred to as that. I am queer. I'm married to a cis man. I'm third generation Italian American, and I'm also neurodivergent and have dynamic physical disabilities. So again, all those things give me a certain lens to this work and to the topic today, any topic I'm facilitating. So Andre, if you could send that Slido information one more time, we're going to just do a quick check-in about how we are celebrating Pride this year. I'd love to hear what folks are getting into to celebrate what is meant to be a month of pride, of celebration, of identities. So if you go to slido.com, again, and you're entering youth pride, you'll be taken to that last passcode, which is mentor. So I'll give you a few seconds to get into that, and your questions or your answers will pop up right away. Yeah, let me know how you are celebrating Pride this year. Just write your answer. Yeah, we're already 11 days into Pride. So much has happened already. DC Pride was just last weekend. Being in community, engaging community joy. Someone went to their first event. Love that. Your first Pride event. Creating Pride displays. So hang out with your mentee. Part of it. Supporting friends and family. Whole world of Pride. Love it. Joining some of the parade. Baltimore Pride again. This is in front of Baltimore Pride. Our events for this weekend, which we are excited about. Pride. Oh, I want to see the Coaching Library building for tweens about crafting with Pride. Love. I want to see pictures. Listening to queer artists, right? Promoting queer art and things like that. Baltimore Pride table at Rockville Pride. We'll be at the Silver Spring Pride. Yes, we love representation. Mentor Melody C will be at Pride this weekend, tabling on Sunday. So look for us there. Maryland County did theirs. Marble on the Shore. Celebrate a little bit each day. Love that. Hanging a flag. We'll talk about more about flags. Oh, look. Everybody would love to go. Still happening. We have so many more days left in Pride Month for you to engage in an event. Spreading facts, breaking stigma. Yes. Yes, more education, getting folks involved in learning during this time, which again, we appreciate you all doing that today. Engaging with PFLAG. You're not familiar with PFLAG, parents. It's a parent group for LGBTQ youth. Definitely a resource when thinking about resources for our mentoring program. Take a big, yes, very Baltimore. skating, roller skating for those not from Baltimore. Pride apparel. Yes, so true. It is everything, right? Oh, I didn't realize that. Oh, that wasn't canceled. All right. Thank you all for sharing. We wanted to engage in some joy before we get into some topics today that may be a bit difficult or are just again about the reality of what's going on right now. So for our agenda, we're going to start with some facts, some terms, some trends about this community. I'm not going to make assumptions about what everybody here knows or what level that we're at. So we'll have some foundational knowledge. We'll also get into some current data and as it relates to the state of affairs and how that is affecting young people. We'll transition. We have Dr. Christian Rummel on the call, which I'm very excited about. We're all very privileged that he's here, but he's going to do a reflection for us of going back into LGBTQ history. We'll get into some relationship building strategies, of course, as it relates to being a mentor, running programs that support young people, and the like. And then we will have a call to action from Jake Sullivan, who runs an LGBTQ youth mentoring program. So we'll get to hear about a program that specifically serves this niche and kind of what that takes, right? So to start, about this population, right? What do we know? There are about 2 million LGBTQ youth. That's about almost 10% of the youth population. The adult population is a little bit less. If you were here on our training last year, you did hear, right, that there has been an increase in youth identifying as LGBTQ. And there's lots of reasons for that, acceptance and language, and those things being some of them. So this kind of makes sense, again, why the youth population will be a little bit more than the current adult population. And then I want to get into disclosure, which is letting someone into part of your identity and how that relates to our young people and where they may be in their journey. And then as it relates to their time in your program, because I know your programs cover lots of years or lots of phases of life for our young people. So as far as sexual orientation disclosure, the average is about 13 and a half years. For disclosure to a family member outside of family, of course, it's different. Almost 14 years old for disclosure of a gender identity to family members. And then there's data that says about 6.7% of all LGBT youth are out to all teachers and other adults, which is a very small amount, right? So it may be why a young person has not let you in, right? It is a lot of work, and we'll talk about that, but the ways we can do that so young people can find their identities and feel comfortable and be affirmed by disclosing things like that. All the data and things you'll see me refer to today, when I send the follow-up, there'll be links, documents to all of these things. So I'm not going to reference each one as we're going, but I will make sure that you have all of that because that is very important. But we have this table here about LGBTQ youth engaging in activities like mentoring programs and things like that. So about 22.5% of LGBT young people are engaged in sports, and even more, 64% in other extracurriculars, some with the schools and some to not. So you may see your program may say, if you have a sports program, are you a school-based program, are you an out-of-school program? What proportion of LGBTQ youth may be in your program? I think it's quite interesting for us to think about because we might not know or we might not be aware of the LGBTQ youth in our program, but the numbers say that at least some of them are likely there. So what can we do to be more supportive of them? Yes, thanks, Karen. Sorry about my sound. If I need to switch to headphones, I will in a little bit. So one thing that I learned when I was researching for this training is that LGBTQ is not actually an acronym, it's an initialism. And an initialism is when you say all the letters. So LGBTQ is the initialism you saw in the title for this training that came about, I believe, in like the 1980s. And then it was much shorter than it is now. It has changed over the years. It will likely continue to change. And it is not totally inclusive of all possible identities and experiences. What I have on the screen are the initials that I have seen to be the most common. I'll share quick definitions, but this is not a definitions training. There are lots of resources to find definitions and things like that. I just want us to not be surprised as we go through some of the identities later on. So lesbian, female identified person who is attracted to other women, gay, a person attracted to members of the same gender, bisexual, a person attracted to two genders, transgender, a queer, a person whose gender identity or expression is not aligned with the gender they were assigned at birth, queer, an umbrella term, lots of umbrella terms you're going to hear me talk about today to describe sexual orientation, gender identity, or expression that does not conform to dominant norms. Intersex, an umbrella term used to describe a variety of conditions in which a person is born with reproductive or sexual anatomy that doesn't fit the medical definitions of female and male. Asexual, a person who does not experience sexual attraction, but may experience other forms of attraction, like intellectual attraction, emotional attraction. So an asexual person may also be a lesbian or gay. They can have multiple identities there. Two-spirit is a cultural term that's used by some Indigenous North Americans to describe Native people who fulfill a traditional third gender social role in their communities. There are a lot of cultural terms as well. Under this umbrella is many cultures and microcultures and intersections. The term same gender loving, sometimes written SGL, is a term coined by Cleo Manago, an advocate for the Black American queer community. And this term was developed in the early 1990s because he felt the vocabulary of non-heterosexual relationships was inadequate for the Black experience of sexual identity. So there are many more. There are more that we don't know about that are specific to certain cultures and things like that. And again, this is, if you're curious and want to learn more, we'll be sharing out the resources for you to do so. I'm not going to give too much information, but as it relates to, there are many flags to celebrate our identities. In this LGBT community, we can signify our pride with a flag. There are many of them. Here is a variety of them. For umbrella, as far as it captures the whole community, the original pride flag was created in 1978 after activist Harvey Milk asked artist Gilbert Baker to design a symbol of gay pride. And I believe that's this flag over here. We have flags just for sexual orientations, flags for gender identity and expression, and intersectionality pride flags. So there are, again, not enough for everything, but what are we even talking about? What are these flags representing? So thank you for that resource, Jake. So, right, what is gender? Orientations are pronouns. Gender is a complex aspect of someone's identity. Orientation has related to different types of attraction and who we are attracted to. Pronouns are, of course, a substitute for someone's name and affirm someone's gender. Xenogenders is describing gender through the use of metaphor rather than male or female. Gender-loving gender, which is another kind of term for, say, SGL, which we just talked about, which is a cultural term. And then aspect is a spectrum, another spectrum. We have a spectrum of everyone, but the spectrum of an individual's lack of attraction, namely asexuality, aromantic, or aplatonic. So you probably heard a lot of words there that maybe you don't know. Again, this is your opportunity to get curious and look more into those. Now, I'll be sure to share you resources with that. I want to quickly go over executive orders and how our young people are being affected right now. In our follow-up, I'll link the Human Rights Campaign's executive order and litigation tracker that they're doing, because so much of this is happening right now to our young people and to our LGBTQ community. So restrictions on gender markers on legal documents such as passports that have to match sex assigned at birth. The reinstating and expanding of the military ban of transgender service members. And something that I learned in the past few months is that the United States military is the largest employer of transgender individuals. So we're talking about huge job loss for the transgender community. Reinstating of the global gag rule, which affects funding for worldwide. And when I was a Peace Corps, I was part of programs that received this kind of funding. So it has to do with sexual health, reproductive health. And it, again, will disproportionately affect the LGBTQ community. Directing agencies to take action to prevent gender affirming care. I have a friend who is a therapist who is a gender affirming care therapist, and mental health care is a huge part of gender affirming care, period. And currently insurance companies are auditing her to see has she provided enough care. Is it time for her to cut off care for these young people? I didn't even know you could ever cut off therapy as someone who's going to be in therapy forever. So these are things that are really at risk for our young people. Attempting to dictate essentially the student experience, how typically students have had rights to be referred to as they want to, as it relates to pronouns, identities, and their name. And that is changing and really at risk. And that will also be fought back locally. So be in touch with your school system about what they are doing to stand up to these kinds of things. And then I'm sure none of us have avoided the backlash against transgender girls participating in school sports teams. I want to get into quickly before I pass it to Dr. Rummel, and we're going to talk quickly about the Trevor Project survey on mental health of LGBTQ young people. I'm going to skip over some of the graphic slides because you'll have those in the follow-up because I want to get to Dr. Rummel. But this is data that just came out. It is regional. If you're not from Maryland or DC, which is the data we'll be covering, there is a report for your state. And this had just come out at the very end of 2024. So it's not even captured the past 6 months, which we can imagine have been quite tumultuous for the LGBTQ community. So as it relates to suicide risk, about 40% of LGBTQ young people in Maryland have seriously considered suicide in the past year. That's about 10% in DC. And then 10% of Maryland's LGBTQ young people have attempted suicide in the past year. So that's 1 in 10. That is a very high and alarming rate. There was not any data for DC. What we also found, again, LGBTQ being an umbrella, what we found for these rates is that all these rates were higher for transgender young people. So that experience of suicidality is increased for that population. And then as it relates to anxiety and depression, 57% of Maryland and 41% of DC LGBTQ youth reported symptoms of anxiety. And a lot as well, 48% of Maryland and 60% of DC LGBTQ youth reported experiencing symptoms of depression. And what we know is that mental health care is not as easy to access. And when you get the slides, you'll see some of those data points. But what we know is that our young people are in need. It is serious. It is not just, just in their mind. Folks are taking action. Folks are looking for support. And there are lots of barriers along the way. So what I want us to think about today is where can we come in as a self, as a resource broker, as a comfort in this time, where the opportunity is for us. So Dr. Rummel, should I introduce you?
It's fine. If you want to say a couple words, I can also do a full introduction with my slides too. That's up to you.
Yes. So again, I mentioned we are very privileged for Dr. Rummel to be here today. He has been in this field for years, the intersection of development, mentoring, and LGBTQ advocacy. He has led research studies, designed affirming training programs, partnered with foundations with the National Mentoring Partnership, and things all over the place. And this comes from his lived experience, which we are going to be privileged to hear more about. So I'm going to pass it to Dr. Rummel now.
Thank you so much, Renee. And I want to thank all of you for being with us today. It's such an important event to be showing up to. I really want to recognize just how important your work is with young people and just how critically needed it is in this moment. I want to share a quote on the next slide, which really kind of highlights why your work is so important. And it really is this idea that relationships are a form of resistance in this moment, especially in this moment. This quote from Harvey Milk really, I think, sums up how I'm feeling right now about the world and the work of mentoring. The only thing they have to look forward to is hope. And you have to give them hope. Hope for a better world, hope for a better tomorrow, hope for a better place to come to if the pressures at home are too great. Hope that all will be all right. Of course, these words were said about 50 years ago. And so it's important to recognize just the power of hope over the generations. I want to share a little bit about myself. Again, as Renee mentioned, I'm Dr. Christian Rummel. I'm a researcher in the mentoring field. I'm the principal consultant at Mentorist. And so for those of you that aren't familiar with Mentorist, there is a free training that is available called Ally Verb, which is really focused on how every caring adult can basically take a strengths-based approach to relationships with LGBTQ plus youth. I also just recently started a newsletter on Substack called Ally Verb in Action, and I'll share both the links to those at the end of my presentation. So I want to say Renee asked me to give a session on the history of LGBTQ plus folks, and I have to say it's a heavy lift. So the way that I wanted to break it down is really a reflection of just one life that's been experienced through generations, and how being queer has shaped who I am, obviously, and then the events that were surrounding me in those generations since the 70s, since that time that Harvey Milk made that quote, that really brought us to this point and where we are. So I'm going to kind of walk you through and basically give you much more of an introduction to me personally. So if we could look at the 70s, which is where the story begins, I was born just a few years after Stonewall. So in Kent General Hospital in Dover, Delaware, on a Thursday night in September 1971. So really not too far from all of you right now. I was the youngest of three children. I grew up at a time when all the kids from the neighborhood would hang out. We'd play kickball. We'd do hide and go seek. And especially in kind of this part of the year, we would start catching lightning bugs, which I think is one of those memories from my childhood that I just absolutely loved. So as far as queer history during this period of time, I have to say, obviously, I didn't have much of an awareness of what was going on in the world outside of my home, but there were a number of pretty significant things that would ultimately shape who I became. And I want to say one of the most important things, which feels like such a small act, but it actually really was pretty vital for LGBTQ plus folks, was that the American Psychological Association in 1973 declassified homosexuality as a mental illness. Now, I have to put this in context because before the 70s, any mention of LGBTQ plus folks usually was viewed as a deviant or something that was wrong or defective, or we were just plain invisible. So the fact that this organization ended up humanizing this very small but significant act was really part of that long road of humanizing who we are as people, and recognizing again that this is not a deficient part of who we are, but a core part of who we are, that our identities, our orientations are all part of the human experience. So I want to emphasize there was a real importance to that act. You also had folks like Harvey Milk, who, again, I quoted, and he was elected city supervisor in 1977 in San Francisco. He ended up sponsoring one of the first bills that would ban discrimination based on sexual orientation and things like housing and employment and public accommodations in the city of San Francisco and the county of San Francisco. And of course, he was assassinated in San Francisco City Hall by Dan White, who was a former supervisor, who, by the way, did vote against that particular amendment. Around the same time, you had folks like Anita Bryant, who was definitely the face of the anti-LGBT plus movement in Florida, which is why you see the little sticker that says Anita Bryant sucks oranges. She launched a campaign to repeal a similar LGBTQ plus non-discrimination ordinance that had been sponsored in Dade County in Florida. And she would say things like, as a mother, I know that homosexuals cannot biologically reproduce children, therefore they must be recruiting our children. She also said things like, if gays are granted rights, next we'll have to give rights to prostitutes and to people who sleep with St. Bernards and to nail biters. She also said, all America and all the world will hear what the people have said, and with God's continued help, we will prevail in our fight to repeal similar laws throughout the nation. And of course, that campaign did lead to the repeal of the ordinance, and she was the face of the anti-LGBT movement for quite some time, and obviously passed away not too long ago. So I'll leave that there. So the 1970s, not much awareness. And again, my entry point clearly was as these personal experiences as a gay man. So the 1980s really had a lot of weight for me. And so when you think about this decade, I was really starting to become aware of being different. I was also internalizing all of those messages that were happening, of things that were going on around me about what that difference meant. So I was about 10 when the first cases of what was called the gay cancer was being shared in the news. And in those early news stories, what I learned was that gay men should be feared, that gay men should feel shame for who they are. I also learned that gay men deserve to die alone in hospital beds with sores, with pain. Those early messages, the whispers that people had around what it meant to be gay, those were the things that I internalized. Those were the things I learned as I was starting to understand who I was. I learned that the cohort of men that were just a little bit older than me, that were completely decimated by this disease, I also learned the silence and the shame that was happening around it, and how that also decimated this community as well. So for me, every birthday wish I had was to not be gay. Every four-leaf clover, every time I had an opportunity to wish for a different life, that is exactly what I did. I saw my future, and I could feel the loneliness, the hopelessness. My difference was not to be celebrated because of who I was and am. So I was also bullied for being different. I would hear fag lobbed at me as I would walk between classes. I would see that word on lockers. I would recognize that it was meant to break me and to also break people who are like me. For me, a good day was to get through that high school door without letting anybody see me cry. And when I reflect on this time, when I reflect on those 4 really difficult years and all of the messages and the shame I was internalizing, the bullying I was experiencing, I start thinking about the place in school that I could go, which was the green room. And for folks like me, that was what I would describe as a misfit or an outsider. That's where we went. It was a room that had mismatched couches. It had props from different sets, posters of Broadway plays, and I could sit there and imagine a world far away from where I was. It was a place I went to escape eating lunch alone and to read all of my books and not worry about being picked on. So I also have to put this in context. We didn't have GSAs at this point in time. We didn't really have many supportive teachers either. So when you think about this moment in time, the thing that we did have was refuge. And so when I really come back to those 4 years through the 80s, I think about the refuge I was able to find in spaces where I wasn't going to be bullied, in spaces where I could breathe again. And I also want to say that I started in those moments to also see glimpses of what was happening outside of my world as far as my community. And so there is the sign that I have behind me, which is from ACT UP. And that was the group of resistors at that time. They took direct action. They did sit-ins. I have this poster up really to honor what it was in their voice that was basically calling the world out to say that that silence was killing people that were like me. It was killing all of the folks through the way that there were few folks like Reagan at the time not even mentioning that this was happening in our world. So the folks from ACT UP, I think, ultimately ended up keeping people like me alive. And so I really honor that, because their sit-ins and the ways that they raised their voices and the power that they had to disrupt and orient, I think, has been part of a thread that has really guided our community over the years. And so I want to say that the 80s for me personally were an incredibly difficult period of time. And when we put this in context, because I think a lot of what Renee just shared with the conversation about executive orders and the silencing and the shame that's happening, we see some similar glimmers, some similar patterns and themes of how people talk about and obviously dehumanize folks who are queer. So I want to continue on the journey because obviously the story is not finished, and I want to share a bit more about the 90s. And so for me, this is actually the decade that I came out. And so I have some photos here. The first is my friend Melanie. Has really been one of the most important people in my life. So Mel and I met at Washington College, so obviously right there on the Eastern Shore of Maryland. And of course, we met in theater class. And we ended up playing lovers in what was a Pirandello play for the theater department. Mel and I became very close friends. And she was the person after I came out after college. I just remember all of the fear that I had that I'd be rejected. And at that time, you really ran a risk every time you shared this truth with people in your life that they would leave you, that they would not want to continue to be present in who you were. And so Mel, the person that she is, of course, told me she loved me. And I mean, I have to say, super lucky for me. She said, I always wanted to have a gay best friend. So she ended up having a list of all the things that she and her gay best friend, which was me, were going to do together. So we went to New York City to see Broadway shows. We went to see representations of people who were like me that were positive. She took me to Provincetown, where I had my first time being lovingly accosted by a drag queen. But in all of those acts, in all of the ways that Melanie showed up for me and with me, she was helping me see that I could love myself. And she was helping me, like we do as mentors, as caring adults, she was helping me to unlearn all of those early messages that I had and to start learning new ways that I could be and in my possibilities as a gay man. So I will say that decade with Melanie's support was so important. And there were a lot of things happening as well. So we had Don't Ask, Don't Tell. We had that horror of Matthew Shepard being murdered in that field in Wyoming, which every single one of us saw ourselves hanging in that field at that time. We saw the AIDS quilt. We had memories of all of the people and the love and the lives that were lost. And then we had some glimmers. There were some moments around representation from folks like Ellen and Will and Grace that showed that visibility was able to start making inroads. So each time someone came out, we saw the power, we saw the ability, again, to humanize, and then the risks that would happen where Ellen lost her show. And of course, someone like Matthew Shepard was murdered for who he was. And I want to talk about this too, because this decade as a gay man obviously was overshadowed still from AIDS. And I will say, I remember getting tested for HIV for the first time. At that time, you would have to go to your county health department. You would have to go somewhere that you could get tested anonymously because you could be denied insurance if you were a gay man, if your insurance company knew that this was part of who you were. So when you got this test, you would go to the county health department and you would get the test and you would have to wait a week before you would know whether or not you were positive. So those weeks that you would wait, that was some of the hardest times because you would picture yourself having the same experiences of that future that you were told that you were going to have, that was going to be you. And so you would have sleepless nights worrying about this. Now, this is before the cocktail. This is before PrEP. AIDS was a death sentence for many, many years. And for folks like me that grew up into that period of time, learning about love, learning about intimacy, that overshadowed so much of those moments. And so when we think of the 90s, for my life, I started to live more openly as who I am. And I also started to see the consequences of those decisions, of those moments. So I'll go into the 2000s now. And I really want to say a lot of this decade helped me reorient some of those early learning experience I had. And so we had, in that period, we had folks that got married in San Francisco City Hall for the first time in 2004. Where marriage was legal for a very brief time. And then we had things like Prop 8 and the anti-marriage backlash that ended up being profoundly cruel. I also started my doctoral studies. And for me, I'll say that one of the key things that I gained through that experience was that I learned about people like me. The data was starting to show that I wasn't alone in my struggles with depression or with anxiety or the difficulties that I was experiencing. That whole groups of us that were part of this community had those same trends. And what was so powerful about that is that it helped me recognize that there were things to be done to break those patterns. And I became acutely focused on this power of mentoring and this power of relationships that could disrupt those patterns of shame and stigma and create new opportunities for kids to feel hope, for young people to develop resilience, to channel the things that someone like Melanie had given me in my life and think about how that could be applied for others. So that's why I ended up doing my doctoral work on mentoring for LGBTQ plus youth and seeing how, again, these relationships and the way that we can kind of disrupt and reorient and help kids unlearn in a space that's safe and affirming and creates belonging and is filled with empathy. The power that you all do lives what it was all those years ago that I'd hoped would be present. And so, again, that period of time, a lot of time for me to reorient and reflect. So we've got a couple more decades. I'll go through these as quickly as I can. So what I want to say is the 2010s. I got married in that same city hall in San Francisco. And Melanie was there as my best person. And so when I think about that moment, I was able to have love, belonging, have a space that was so rich in all of this queer history that I was being present in. There was such power in that. And, you know, to be able to celebrate the Supreme Court ruling in 2015 and just, I was there at Pride in San Francisco right after, and it was incredible. There was this feeling that we had finally pushed through. And we had folks like Laverne Cox, who was showing visibility on the cover of Time magazine. I never would have pictured that in my life. And how amazing her role modeling was for kids. And I have to say, this is what I want to highlight, is that she was even asked, like, how does it feel to be a role model for trans youth growing up today? What does that mean to you? And this quote stuck with me for years. I would never be so arrogant to think that someone should model their life after me, but the idea of possibility, the idea that I get to live my dreams out in public, hopefully will show to other folks that it's possible. So I prefer the term possibility model to role model. And for me, that is exactly what mentoring is all about. It is helping young people see their possibilities, to grow into who they are. And I really thank Laverne Cox for sharing all of that, because it really helped me rethink this way that we engage with young people and what our kind of role is. So that same decade, we saw the backlash start to happen. We started to see House Bill 2, the bathroom bill that was in North Carolina, the wave that really has continued today. And I'll talk about this. Like, At the time, I was working at a pretty large educational research organization focusing on LGBTQ plus homelessness and trying to understand how to disrupt that, looking at mentoring. And I wrote a blog post for this organization, and it was really looking at HB House Bill 2 and how what we were starting to see the power that taking small actions in our relationships, creating policies or climates that young people could be who they are, would end up helping to save their lives in a lot of ways, and also make sure that those trajectories of risk that we know about are disrupted. So I was talking about that and also how this law could cause more harm. So in this organization, this blog post had to go all the way up for approvals to the executive director, who did approve it personally. It goes live and was taken down within the next day. The organization said it was posted in error and that it didn't meet the standards of this particular agency. So I want to say that the shapes, the forms of discrimination run deep. They all are meant to have the same effect over all of these generations, which is to continue silencing, to make invisible, to allow shame to be the standard, and also setting up this dynamic that says that if you are trying to break the silence, that you're being political when the standard right now is not. And so that decade continued to let me see what was possible, and also, I would argue, let us see what's happening now. And so where we are in the 2020s is heartbreaking to me, because I look at all of the forward momentum that I'd seen in the 50 years of my life, the things that I expected would continue to some degree, and I worry that our high water mark has been reached. I worry now about the cruelty that we see, the 1,500 anti-LGBT plus bills, the executive orders that Renee talked about. They've even renamed Harvey Milk's ship in the last couple of weeks. It's hard for me. It's hard to see all of these things happen. And I will say I have been grieving. I have lost almost all of my work since the start of this year because of the nature of this. I'll stop that. No, the nature of the administration and the cruelty that's happened. I've been frustrated. I'm exhausted. And I also know there is this critically important role that I have and that we all have to show up for the next generations of young people, for the decades that are to come. We still have a responsibility to be possibility models, to help and craft messages of hope, to let young people know that they're loved, that they belong. The story is not over yet. So I want to share some of the things that are giving me a lot of what I would say is hope right now. And it comes in the relationships that I have in my life, the resistors I have in my life, the quiet empathy that really does stand to this moment. And if I could actually, if you could go back to the last slide for one quick moment, I want to share images of the people and the things that really are part of that. So you can see Kimchi Kitty, which is John and my cat, who is helping to make posters for one of the protests. And my sign was saying empathy is resistance. You can also see my husband, Jonathan, who has worked with me to create a garden of a bunch of edibles and native plants that I find refuge in. You see Nia Clark, who has been one of my co-conspirators and co-trainers in a lot of the work that we've done with Big Brothers Big Sisters over the years. And I want to leave with the photo of my mom, who is 89. And I will say my mom went to her very first protest in her life at 89 years of age because she could not and would not accept the cruelty of this administration towards LGBTQ plus folks. So I want to say there's power in each of these relationships and the forces that they offer me. and what they hold. And I'll wrap this up on the next slide, which is the last part of my reflection about what this means. And I'll summarize my experience is that, first of all, queer history shows that queer people have existed and we have survived. We're still here. We're still present. And I'll say that mentoring and the relationships that we possess are some of the most powerful forms that we hold of resistance. They help us build possibilities. They give us opportunities to practice and promote resilience. They give spaces for refuge. They strengthen and affirm all of the gifts of what it means to be LGBTQ plus and our identity. They create opportunities for us to grow and experience positive development. And I think one of the most important parts is they create spaces of belonging. So when I think about all of this, this is really what you all are doing. This is your work. This is what you're resisting in this moment. You are taking actions in your day to day. And I want to leave with a quote that one of my mentors has really often described about the ripple effect that each of us have to promote change through these relationships. And it's from Margaret Mead. And it's the quote, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has." And so you are all that small group of thoughtful, committed citizens. You're the resistors. You're creating spaces of refuge. You're building these relationships. You're making differences every single day. And I want to thank you for all that you offer in this moment and beyond, because as you see, we are meeting a moment unlike anything we have seen in decades. So I want to give my contact information for those of you that are interested. I do have, as I mentioned, that free online training. So you can go to mentorist.org. If you want to sign up for the Ally, Verb, and Action newsletter, I highly encourage that. It's really looking at all of these ways that we can show up and offer hope in our relationships. And so definitely want to encourage you to sign up for those and look for some of the free resources. Again, thank you so much for having me and for being part of our session today.
Applause emojis, heart emojis. Thank you so much, Dr. Rummel. I know myself and in the chat it's being affirmed. People really appreciate sharing your story. And Dr. Rummel was right. I was asking about how does the history that's being made now relate to our history and therefore prove that there's opportunity for hope and for our continued existence and the like. So thank you, Dr. Rummel, for giving us that perspective and making it personal, because it means a lot that you shared with us. So we're going to transition now into talking about relationship building strategies. And I think Dr. Rummel did a great job of talking about the power of relationship and doing them well. And that is what we are going to talk about. How do we do this exceptionally well in this moment where it is really needed and relationships can be more powerful than ever? So I want to bring up this data point that we missed earlier, that is specifically about young people saying what adults can do in their lives to show their support and acceptance. And there's the Maryland data on the left and the DC data on the left. But many of them feel that their communities are accepting, which is great. We love that. And of course, we want to make sure that your programs are accepting as well. But what we have here is that young people are saying how folks are doing it. How are they feeling affirmed and accepted in their communities? So it comes from trusting that the young person knows who they are, not supporting politicians that advocate for anti-LGBTQ legislation is a big one, standing up for them, which again is a quality I think we all know to have as a mentor, right? Looking up things about LGBTQ identities on their own to better understand. So you all are here, you're starting to do that, right? And that is what we see from the data, affirming to young people, respecting my pronouns. We'll just say it's only 60%. I think we can get to 100%, right? And showing support for how I express my gender. So everyone here, I believe you are on the right track, and I hope this inspires you to take even more specific action on how we can support our LGBTQ young people. We're going to go through a few concepts, some of which you have heard us talk about in other trainings, and I will link recordings to those. But again, that these skills are more important now than ever. So I know that many of you, because I recognize your names and your faces, have been to our providing emotional support and empathy training that we've done a few times this spring. And I think from those who came to the training, I heard from you often, right? This is something that we need right now. And Dr. Rummel mentioned it as well. So empathy is us being open to imagining another person's experiences from their point of view and striving to find points of connections. This is what we call the empathy loop, which is perceiving what others are feeling, processing the information, and being responsive to the other person's experience. Imagining that this person is our young person. So that takes a lot of our own actions before we get back to the part where we're saying something to young people, right? There's a lot of internal work that happens when we're making empathy happen, and not just making it happen, but making it happen in a way where our young person really feels it. And that is what matters, right? It's one thing to call yourself empathetic all day, but if the person you're in a relationship with doesn't feel that way, then it doesn't mean very much. So what we know about empathy and what is good is that it is a skill that we can grow through learning and practice. So if you haven't been to our training, again, I'll make sure you get that link or come another time. But this is something that we can grow into, which is, I hope, reassuring, right? If we're not feeling so empathetic in certain moments. But a big part of practicing empathy is that perspective taking, the ability to step outside of our own experiences and take the view of your mentee's experiences. And I'll be honest, right now, perspective taking may be harder than ever because I know many of us are feeling insecure about the various things that are happening in the world, in the economy, at work, that it can be hard for us to see outside of our own situation where we may feel under attack or at risk or insecure for other parts of our identities or experiences. So again, empathy is a skill. It's done best when done intentionally. So keeping in mind that this is something that we can continue to do. And a quick framework for the live practice of empathy in the moment is that when our mentee is sharing with us, we refer to the ABC model. Is that one, we acknowledge what they say to us, let them know that we heard them and understand. Two, we take a breath, all right? Do some attuning with how we're feeling, take a breath so we can be calm. And then that last piece, be curious, which that can come in the form of asking a person questions, open-ended questions, or doing a curiosity of what we saw on the previous slide, an adult looking more into the young person's identity or LGBTQ identities and being curious in that way. So I appreciate that you're all curious enough to come to this training, but you can think back to this model when you're in those moments with the young person where you're trying to practice your empathy well and maybe feeling a little disoriented in doing so because the reality of being a young person, an LGBTQ young person right now, is quite difficult. And those things can be hard to hear as a mentor and somebody who cares about that young person. Pardon me, I want to review cultural humility, a training we've not done in a while, but has been very powerful and popular. But cultural humility is an ongoing, lifelong process of self-reflection and learning about how social identity and experiences are shaped by systems of oppression, power, and privilege. So a social identity is a person's sense of who they are based on their group membership, which can reflect physical, social, and mental characteristics. And you heard me name a lot of my social identities in my beginning slide, right, about my race, my gender, my abilities, my sexualities, and things like that. So we know LGBTQ, which again is an umbrella. So that you could say this is one culture, but there's all these cultures and microcultures under that. So the idea of being culturally humble is that we're continuing to learn about these social identities and that we're taking into consideration how those experiences are shaped by oppression, power, and privilege, which I think Dr. Rummel really exemplified well when he was telling the story of his life through history. Another thing we want to consider when we are in a relationship with our young people is like the acknowledgement that there is always an age-based power differential. What we know about the United States and our culture is that it disempowers youth and adults have all the power, basically, right? So there is always that power differential, even if you and your mentee share a lot of the same social identities, even if you grew up in the same place. I always say, and I know many of you have heard me say this before, but even if you have all the same identities as a young person, you went to the same school, you grew up in the same neighborhood, the fact of the matter is that they're a young person now, you were a young person when. And that is a huge difference between you and them. And this is where that curiosity piece plays, where you have to learn what is it like to be this young person, this LGBTQ young person right now, which we've gotten a lot of information about how that's going and how difficult it is. So when you think about that, I want you to take into consideration how might those things impact your relationship. But what does it mean to really practice cultural humility? And if my microphone goes out, please let me know because my headphones just said battery low. So when you think about you all practitioners who are culturally humble, again, it's that continuous reflection of their own social identity. Are you connected with the aspects of your own identity? And then also making efforts, that curiosity piece, to learning more about your youth's social identity, their experiences, and their background, and continuing to be curious because, again, young people are dynamic. They're always changing. It's the nature of being a young person. So we're always getting to know them a little bit more every time we connect with them. I've kind of said before, again, the differences and similarities between how we're shaped by the inequalities in society. When we think about how we can self-reflect, includes asking questions about and exploring the many ways, again, that we define ourselves and what do those identities mean in the context of the power structure of the United States, which, again, I think Dr. Rummel did a really good job about. That's a real reflection that he did, right? And that's not something we can just bring off the top of our heads, right? A real true reflection takes effort and time and a commitment to doing so. So how can we, in figuring out in relationship with a young person as it relates to our program and our relationship with them, seeking opportunities to learn about their cultures, not just their LGBTQ identity, but where that intersects with the other cultures that they are a part of, when warranted, of course, when invited, that you may also be able to participate as well. But again, always having that learning and curiosity piece. Engaging in the process of asking questions and learning about their identities, being curious and letting them know that you are curious directly by simply asking the questions and always taking into those considerations the system of oppression and privileges as well. And as well, remaining open to the idea that your young person's work experiences may be different than yours, again, even if you share other social identities. And then, of course, learning about young people's families and being in touch with young people's families. Because we also know, and unfortunately we skipped the data, but not every LGBTQ young person has a safe and affirming relationship with their family. However, as mentoring programs, we need to have a relationship with this family, especially if they need to, especially because their parent or family is how they get to be in your program, right? Need their buy-in. So knowing that, learning about their families, building relationships on both sides with the young person and with the families, so we can try to, again, build everybody's empathy, expand everyone's kind of cultural humility, and what we can do to support our young person and the time that they may be going through in their family. I know some of you may have been present at our Askable Adult training, which was in the fall. So I'll also link that. Sorry, hiding my background here. I'll link that video as well. But there's this idea of being an askable adult. So an askable adult simply is an adult that is approachable and easy to talk to about any topic. And what we know, again, from these times, what we've looked at so far, is that might be a wide range of topics, and it might be quite serious as well. If we're talking about young people who are facing serious anxiety or depression or even suicidality, you want to be as askable as possible so that young people seek you out when they have questions, when they need help, when they're looking for resources. Being askable sets you up to be that available resource to them. So what is an askable adult like? Of course, they're patient, consistent. Consistency is so important in relationship with our young people. Respectful, honest, kind, trustworthy, lighthearted. So there's still that time for that as well. Open-minded, non-judgmental, and knowledgeable. So there's kind of 4 skill sets that we talk about as it relates to being an askable adult. So that starts with building trust and affirming relationships. Trust is the assured reliance on the character, ability, strength, and integrity of another person. So that is a lot. It is not easy to do. If you are early in a mentoring relationship, I would say that this is the thing that you are working on, but it takes that consistency, respect, and honesty to really get into those places. Commit to consistent connections. Consistency is, when I was supervising mentors and training mentors, every mentor one-on-one, I was talking about consistency. And it's not just that you agree to show up at this time every week, but that when you walk into a room, a young person can predict how you may act or react. Because again, a young person is dynamic. They're going to act different every week, most likely, and over time as well as they grow up. But you are the person, and we make this commitment when we become mentors that we are going to be consistent and as predictable as we can possibly be. So a young person doesn't feel shocked, scared, confused. And now when we cannot be that, we're being communicative and as clear as possible with our young person. And committing to caring, communication, putting away judgment, asking what they need, and really listening. I love this acronym, which is WAIT. Why am I talking? Right? When we're in a relationship with young people, if you are talking, what is it now the time for you to talk, or should you be listening? Or are you really contributing something to the conversation and relationship? So being mindful of that and checking yourself at times, because we adults love to talk, we love to help, we love to support, and so much of the time it's coming from a good place. But why am I talking? Right? How is it serving my young person? I think I've rehashed that enough. I want to watch this video, which is 5 minutes long and is going to close this section. But this is about youth resiliency, which Dr. Rummel talked about a lot. This is from Dr. Ken Ginsberg, who I had the privilege of seeing speak before and is somebody who I refer to a lot when I talk about other topics. But this video is about the 7 C's of resilience, and I'll link his website and things in the follow-up. But we're going to watch this video for the next 5 minutes, and then we'll transition to our next speaker.
Resilience is about being able to bounce back from difficult circumstances. When we are equipped with the ability to be resilient, it's not just that we can survive difficulty, it's that we're actually prepared to thrive. The best line about resilience was said by Anne Maston: resilience is ordinary magic. The question is what activates that magic? And without a shadow of a doubt, it's human connection. It's someone who absolutely sees you in all of your completeness, in all of your complexity, and still chooses to care about you. There is nothing more protective than that in a human life. So connection is one of the 7 C's. And the 7 C's are not a list, they're an approach. They're interwoven. They all build on one another. After connection, human beings need confidence. How are you going to take a chance to be able to overcome a difficult circumstance without the confidence, the belief that you can? But where does confidence come from? It's not another person just going, I believe in you. It's got to be someone who builds your confidence based on what you've already done, your competencies. So your competencies, your skills, and your confidence are interwoven. And those are activated, again, by the human connection, the other C. But what else do we want? We want to raise young people who are prepared to take over our world and build better communities and a stronger society. We want people, we need people with character, an understanding of what is right and what is wrong, having a deep sense of values that are committed to supporting other people and supporting communities. When you have that character and you have the confidence, then you're prepared to contribute to the world, right? What makes a person being ready to contribute? It's that they have the character, but they also have a sense of meaning and purpose. They know that they can matter, right? So these are the things that develop youth. But we also want to prevent youth from suffering from life's challenges. That's where coping The sixth C comes in, coping. The bottom line is that everything we fear in adolescence, whether it's alcohol or drugs or relations out of the context of, having a healthy relationship with someone, whether it's cutting, all of these things, people don't do them because they want to be bad or they want to upset you. They do it as a way to escape the realities of their lives. And what never works is looking at a human being and say, you shouldn't do that, right? Or you're broken and therefore you're doing it. What helps a person learn to cope is to understand and recognize their sensitivity, recognize their pain, and say there are better ways of managing it. And I know what they are. Let me guide you. And that brings me to the final piece, control. You either believe that you control your destiny or you believe that things happen to you. And when we help people gain a sense of control, we're not only helping their development, we're helping them heal from trauma. Because trauma takes away your sense of control. So when we, the adults, recognize them as experts in their own lives, we don't say things like, I need you to do this. Why? Because I said so. That takes away control. We don't say, I need you to do this. Why? Because I know better. That takes away control. Instead, we understand that fundamental to youth development, fundamental to healing from trauma, is seeing people as the experts in their own life and guiding them so that they can get more and more control, which gives you confidence and a sense of competence, which makes you be ready to contribute to the world because you know you matter, and that builds your character. It all comes together.
Thank you, Dr. Ginsberg. I'll be sure to list his resources as well. There are many. I love what he has to say about coping, which again is really important in these times that we're again letting go of judgment about how our young people are coping through these times. And now we're able to be supportive and help young people find coping strategies that are healthy and will continue to keep them going. So I will come back after our next speaker to wrap us up, but I'm going to transition in to Jake Sullivan. Jake.
Awesome. Thank you, Renee. Hi, everybody. Great to be here with you all. My name is Jake Sullivan. I use he, him pronouns. I'm the director of mentorship at Linked Mentoring. I'm also the senior manager of field learning at Mentor National. My background is entirely in youth serving organizations, both at a direct youth work and also at national levels. Linked Mentoring is a grassroots volunteer-led organization that was founded about 7 years ago. The organization was initially founded by a mother and her son when the son came out, and they were looking for more support at that point in the central Massachusetts area. It's evolved, expanded to being now a completely virtual and national organization, still very grassroots in our nature though, where we match LGBTQ plus youth with LGBTQ plus mentors. Again, completely virtual. And at this point, we have youth and mentors in several states, which is why I'm here in front of you all. We've gotten a chance to spread around and ultimately, again, focus on LGBTQ plus youth. Here a little bit to talk about why LGBTQ plus mentoring and some of the things that I've observed in this work and some recommendations for you all. So we can go to the next slide. So I included a couple of these quotes from our mentees as somewhat of a background of why LGBTQ plus specific mentoring is important. The one that I'll focus on is the second one that I really appreciated around this idea of the rainbow sheep. I had never heard of that phrasing before, but this mentee said that linked mentoring helped me feel like I wasn't the rainbow sheep of everywhere I was at. And I really appreciated this comment because sometimes growing up in basically every other space that's not LGBTQ plus specific, you can often be singled out for your identity. You're the gay kid or you're the trans kid or whatever. That's the thing that people focus on about you. But in spaces like linked mentoring or that are LGBTQ plus specific, you can also be an artist. You can be a gamer. You can kind of just be a whole person alongside your identity. And so that's kind of the power or part of the power of matching LGBTQ plus youth with LGBTQ plus adults. The next point here that I really wanted to focus on was the history. And as Christian did such an amazing job at kind of illustrating part of the history of the LGBTQ plus community, the history of mentoring within the LGBTQ plus community is huge. And because of the necessity of community and chosen family, everyday mentoring practices have really been baked into the LGBTQ plus community, whether you think of it as drag performers taking younger and more inexperienced drag performers under their wings, teaching them how to do their makeup or how to style a wig. If you think about it as houses in the ballroom scene, activists, and then of course the idea of chosen family, those ideas of intentional relationship building and community have been and always will be queer. So again, it's something that for queer people, queer and trans people, it's something that's often very inherent. Lived experience mentoring, this is broader than just queer mentoring, but there's definitely, again, a power in being connected with someone who just sort of inherently gets it and has gone through similar things as you. One of my favorite stories that I'll condense really, really quickly is we had a trans boy come into our program years ago. He was super nervous about his first meetings with his doctor to start talking about puberty blockers. We were able to match him with a trans man as a mentor who had a similar background, similar journey. In their first few meetings, the trans man was able to break down a lot of the terminology, a lot of the questions that the doctor might ask, and that sort of thing. And so, going into that first meeting, the mentees' parents were like, he was a completely different kid. He walked in head high, asking questions, super confident. And so again, just having someone that has potentially gone through some of the same experiences can be really powerful. And then lastly here, the power of grassroots mentoring or grassroots organizations and grassroots work in general really goes hand in hand again with the LGBTQ plus community and advocacy. So it's kind of a natural fit to really focus in on connecting members of the LGBTQ plus community together. We can go to the next slide. So some challenges and opportunities. So I put a few bullet points here of what I'm hearing from the young people that we work with. They're definitely paying attention and they're definitely fearful. We have a weekly group aside from our one-to-one mentorship program that mentees often used to talk about their pets and video games and things like that. But the facilitators of that group have really noticed a shift in focus to the anti-LGBTQ plus legislation out there. Mentees are nervous thinking about and talking about how does this affect me? And again, since we have mentees in different states, it's very context dependent, which kind of leads me to the next opportunity, I would say, around community connections. One of the things that we're rolling out as a program is called Regional Community Ambassadors, which even though we're kind of working on a national scale, I think this is something that could be implemented anywhere on any scale, local here in Baltimore or on a state level basis. But having volunteers who are specifically very connected in their community and can help identify and vet resources and other organizations in their area that are LGBTQ plus affirming, so that when the time comes that a resource is needed, a doctor is needed, a therapist is needed, support in schools is needed, an after school program, we have a specific person we can go to who knows the context, who knows the different relationships and dynamics amongst organizations that can recommend those for our youth and families. I think when I talk about this work, one of the biggest things that people, or most common things that people ask about is privacy, safety, and confidentiality. In full transparency, I think this is something that we, along with other programs, are still really figuring out when it comes to the fact that many of the young people that could really use a program like ours can't access it because we do need parental consent or guardian consent. The way that we've navigated that in the past, if that's not a possibility, is that we do sometimes take it on a case-by-case basis, such as getting other family members to sign off on things, depending on the severity of, we do a lot of risk management stuff and that sort of thing with the young people and the people that they are referred to our program by. This last point is it could be a whole webinar in and of itself, but I did really want to highlight it because it's something that we've been working on over the past year, and this is something that I want to credit JMAC for Families. I can drop a link in the chat. But they are a really amazing group and organization, really re-envisioning what it means to support young people. And it's around this idea of mandated supporting versus mandated reporting. And again, some of us have legal obligations, but the reality is LGBTQ plus youth are more likely to experience violence and continued lack of access to resources once they're somehow involved in the state system. And so over this past year, we've been doing a lot of work around adapting our own policies and procedures to be within this mandated supporting framework. which boils down to it's kind of exhausting every possible option before ever doing that mandated reporting step. It's based in equity, it's based in anti-racism, harm reduction work that essentially is trying to divert away from systems of violence, surveillance, and punishment. So recommend you check that out. Again, this is something that I think is specific, not just specific to LGBTQ plus youth, but since LGBTQ plus youth are often disproportionately harmed by those systems, something to keep in mind. We can go on to the next slide to continue with recommendations. So again, as I was saying, explore community-based alternatives, whether it is regarding something as safety or mandated reporting, but also just stay connected with the people in your area. Again, I think as Renee was saying, this is an amazing step that you're all taking this month to learn and be connected and engage in this work, specifically in supporting LGBTQ plus youth. But I encourage the continuation of exploring frameworks and resources and getting connected with other community organizations that are also LGBTQ plus affirming. The next point here is kind of around that idea that discrimination and violence are becoming more and more normalized and also state sanctioned. Help your mentors and mentees and their families know their rights, know the resources available to them, whether their rights are in schools or receiving medical care. Whatever that is, there are a lot of resources out there. I linked one right there on the slide from the ACLU that breaks some of that information down. A lot of our mentors will help our mentees walk through things like this and walk through resource mapping and connecting different important resources in their areas and other important adults in their lives to make sure that mentees and young people feel prepared. LGBTQ plus youth are youth. Again, kind of back to that rainbow sheep quote. Let them be kids. Let them play games, talk about other things, talk about their other interests, and also make sure that you're taking time to learn about LGBTQ plus youth development. So things like identity formation, how sometimes social milestones might look different for LGBTQ plus youth, and acknowledging the unique experiences of LGBTQ plus youth as they're growing up. Last but not least, normalize. This is something that, again, applies to every young person, but don't just ask LGBTQ plus youth what their pronouns are or what name they'd like to be called. Ask all of your young people that. That should be something that's a basic practice of your entire program, so that you're normalizing these things and also making sure that you're not just singling outing LGBTQ plus youth. We can go on to the next slide, or the last slide, to stay connected. So if you have young people who might be interested, or if you know someone who's interested in mentoring, connecting, or talking more, you can email me here at jake@linkedmentoring.org. You can visit our website, www.linkedmentoring.org, to learn more about us and our programming. Our applications are there and everything. I really appreciate you all taking the time, and pass it back over to Renee.
If somebody wants to be a regional connection, they should reach out to you.
Yes, yeah, I'll look in the chat. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Jake. I wanted to, again, for us to have experience or to hear from the experience of directly LGBTQ mentorship and the power of that as well. This may be a resource for a young person who's at your after school program, but could use a LGBTQ mentor if this is still a resource, and especially that it's virtual as well, is that it is even more accessible. But we are wrapping up. I want to thank you all for being here. Again, you will get everything we referred to and more a week from today. We have to wait a week. In the follow-up, as well as myself, Dr. Roma, and Jake's contact information. And you will also get a evaluation form survey about this training in your email. There's also the QR code on the left. This is the topic you want. This training could have been twice as long. And in fact, there's so many more slides that we didn't go over that we could keep going. But if this is a topic you want us to revisit, please write that in the evaluation form. So we do that for you all. And then I want to just point out something that Jake said about making time for young people to be young people, which is something we're always advocating for. But I heard someone say recently that when a young person, like imagine those of us who've been in the work for a while, it's hard to pull a young person away from a game to get them on to the next activity, is that when a young person is engaged in play, it means they want to keep going. And we're like, period, right? To keep living, to keep connecting. And when we think about young people who, as you saw from the data, are considering, not being here anymore, being engaged in something like play and community and connection can be so, so very powerful and have that important impact, which is why we gathered you all here today is to make that point. It's that the power of intentional relationship building, of spaces being safer than other spaces a young person may be, well, then the times are right now, right? That if your program has the opportunity to do that for young people, it's never been more powerful for you to do it. So thank you all for being here. Thank you, Dr. Rummel. Thank you, Jake. And you will hear from us in a week with all of the follow-ups. But again, we appreciate you making a commitment to learning and sharing about the topic. And also, happy Pride and happy Baltimore Pride. Again, us and Jake will be at Baltimore Pride on Monday. So, not Monday, well, Sunday. So come find the table and you can reconnect with Jake face to face, and my colleague Kiana will be there. And again, thank you so much for being here.